It's now time for the first presentation. I'd like to introduce Mr. Joshua Olutola, the Senior Equity Trader, ARM Securities Limited, to deliver his presentation on building your own portfolio. Over to you, Mr. Joshua.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Loretta. 1 second, let me just put up my presentation. Okay, so Loretta, can you confirm that you can see my screen and I'm audible enough?
Yes, we can see your screen and we can hear you clearly. Project your voice a little bit, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the attendees. Thank you for creating time out of your busy schedule to attend this webinar. And also to the management of the exchange, thank you for creating this forum where we can discuss creation of investment portfolio that works, that will be able to withstand volatilities in the market on the back of the COVID-19 that has happened in recent times. So today we'll be looking at the global impact of the pandemic, how much of an impact that had in our lives in the financial space, how it relates to the Nigerian equities market, what we should be expecting going forward, the typical needs of an equity investor, and how we can effectively create an investment portfolio going forward. So to a large extent, I'm sure everyone is well aware of how much of an impact the COVID-19 pandemic has been in our lives. I think it disrupted the financial world severely. And I think the last time we had this much of an impact was in 2007, 2008, when we had the global financial meltdown. But to a large extent, the impact we felt in the financial space was even more severe compared to the global financial meltdown. And to the point that we were all held up in our houses, we couldn't move around. Travels was shut down. Tourism also came to an halt, and pretty much disruption in financial market, and not just the equity market. We also felt that disruption in the fixed income market. And to put this into perspective, major economies in the world actually declined significantly. World GDP was down about 3.6% in 2020. And we also see that playing out in advanced economies and also developing economies. And Nigeria also wasn't left out of this decline in economic activity. Nigeria is the biggest economy in Africa with a GDP of about $432 billion. Our economy declined about 1.92% in 2020, and which is massive, right? And the first official case of the COVID-19 virus was in December 2019, and it's surprising that 2 years down the line we are all still talking about pandemic, to show you how much of a wide-reaching impact it had directly and also indirectly. But fast forward to what we have today, we can see that there's been a lot of recovery. There's been a lot of effort by government to jumpstart the economy, and we see that we've seen success in those efforts. And to put a number to it, China, which to a large extent is more or less like the genesis of the COVID-19. We've seen China's economy grow by about 18.3% in Q1. That's the first quarter of 2021, by about 18.3%, which is massive considering the fact that they were heavily impacted by the coronavirus. And in Q2 2021, China's economy also grew by about 7.9%, and China is estimated to grow by about 8.5% by end of the year. So which more or less speaks to the fact that there's been a lot of efforts to revitalize the economy, and we're seeing a bit of lopsided recovery across major countries of the world. And to a large extent, we've also seen a positive trend between vaccination rates and also economic activity. We've seen that's the GDP growth rate. So for instance, China currently has about 83% of his population being administered, right, has taken up the COVID-19 vaccine. At least one or two of those COVID-19 dosage has been administered to 83% of China's population. And we see this trend also playing out in a number of advanced economies, Japan, Brazil, USA. But when you look at the African countries, and the reverse to a large extent is the case. Nigeria, for example, has vaccination rate of about 3%, and that speaks to the fragile recovery we are seeing in Nigeria. Q1 2021, Nigeria's economy grew by just a meager 0.5%. And in Q2, Nigeria's economy grew by about 5%. And it's estimated that Nigeria's economy is going to grow by about 2.5%, which to a large extent is still very much fragile. So I think that's the overview of what has happened in the global space. Going forward, we think that economic activity will be boosted by the level of vaccination rates that we're seeing across the globe. Okay, so bringing it home, right, and looking at the Nigerian equities market. In 2020, the market recorded 50% positive gain, right? But when you look at the positive performance, it doesn't tell the whole story, right? The market was actually bedeviled by a number of volatilities. We had a lot of volatilities in the market. I could remember in April 2020, the market was down about 22%. And this was also a time where crude oil prices was down to about $10 per barrel. And being the mainstay of the Nigerian economy, it had a direct correlation to the Nigerian market, right? But we started seeing a bit of improvement in sentiment, increase in trading activities towards fourth quarter of 2020, when prices of stocks had hit bottom low, and it was a no-brainer to cherry pick those stocks. And also we saw fixed income yields decline significantly. 1-year T-bill was around 2% levels. And also there was excess system liquidity, right? And that actually caused a lot of reallocation of funds to equity. And that was why we saw the very positive performance we recorded in the equities market in 2020, right, against all odds. But coming into 2021, a number of investors had that perception, and we also saw that bullish sentiment play out in January, as you can see on the chart. The market rallied in the first month of the year to about 5.3% to break 3-year high, but that wasn't sustained, right? We started seeing a bit of correction in the market as fixed income yields started inching higher, and a bit of sell pressure happened in the market. So fast forward to what we have today, the market had gained about 7.35% as at yesterday. Today, the market also printed a positive performance of about 0.4, which makes year to date about 7.41%, right? We've seen a roller coaster ride in the equities market, a lot of volatilities. And what question comes to mind is that as we begin to strategize for 2022, we need to also start putting in mind how do we want our investment portfolio to shape, and how do we what do we expect in the new year, in the short to mid term. And I think very important also, in 2021, we saw a number of efforts by the Nigerian exchange. For one, the demutualization of the exchange was completed, and that enabled the Nigerian exchange reposition itself to become a profit-oriented organization. And also it added about 1.96 billion shares to the Nigerian daily official list, and also increased trading activities and liquidity in the Nigerian market. So I think that being said, it's very important to note that given the unique circumstances in Nigeria, Nigeria still ranks one of the lowest in terms of price earnings ratio, in terms of valuation. And when I mean price earnings ratio, it means that how affordable, how cheap is our stocks on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Based on the data on the chart, Nigeria's exchange has 10.56 times PE ratio. And when you compare that to a number of African exchanges, you see that there's still a lot of room for growth. And also in terms of stock market capitalization to GDP, Nigeria being the biggest economy in Africa, when you compare the capitalization of its exchange to the size of its economy, you realize that there's still a lot of growth opportunities in Nigeria. And as we go into 2022, it will be good for us to a large extent identify those opportunities. So in terms of what to expect going forward, we've highlighted a number of events that we think would shape the market going into 2022. In terms of GDP, I'd already mentioned expectation for GDP this year is 2.5% according to IMF. And in 2022, it's going to be about 2.7%. But when you compare that to the population growth rate, which is about 3%, it speaks to the fact that it's still a very fragile economic recovery, right? And I think the optimal level is that we should be growing above our population growth rate. And also 2022 is a pre-election year, and election activities comes with its own uncertainties, and that also has influence on investor sentiment. So I think going into next year, the overriding word that we should have at the back of our mind is caution. It's going to be a cautious year, considering those factors, those indicators that I've mentioned. And we did a survey, we did an analysis, right, to look at 5 pre-election cycles, and it shows that the Nigerian equities market actually closed up on 3 occasions out of 5. So which more or less boils down to the fact that next year you can't really call it. There will be a lot of uncertainty in the market. So as an investor going into the year, having strategizing, and not just as an individual, corporate organizations are also in the period where they're also strategizing for next year. You also have it at the back of your mind that next year is going to be very cautious. You have to just take up a cautious approach in taking positions in the market. And I think very important is in the oil and gas space is the petroleum industry bill, which was recently passed into law by the Nigerian legislature. And also it was assented to by President Buhari. And we think that going into next year, this would pretty much create the necessary framework in the oil and gas space, create the necessary framework, and also help with global competitiveness, right? And we've seen that segment of the market has not really harnessed its true potentials. But with this new bill coming into force, we expect that would help to revitalize that industry, and it has a positive implication on oil and gas companies listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, right? And also, especially those that operate in the midstream and also the downstream sector. And to mention, Dangote Refinery is also expected to come upstream next year, and also that has implication for in order to create the required foreign exchange savings for Nigeria, especially the monetary authorities. Okay, so in terms of other events to expect going forward, for exchange rate, we really do not expect much. We already understand the body language of the monetary authority. As much as possible, they will want to keep rates at current level. And if there's going to be any adjustments, not going to materially change from current levels, maybe maximum of 10% adjustment. I think the major thing to watch out for would be liquidity, right? How liquid will the market be going into next year? And because that has major implications on foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, and which of course has correlation with the Nigerian equities market. And to mention, corporate deals has been a consistent trend in the market of recent. I think for the past 2 to 3 years. In 2019, we saw a number of corporate deals, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, divestment, offer for sale recently announced by MTN. Some of those deals have been concluded in 2021, and some are still ongoing. And we expect a number of those corporate deals to happen in 2022. So as we begin to strategize, I think the corporate deals announcement creates a number of excitement in the market, because retail investors, institutional investors just also want to get a piece of the pie. And it creates tactical trading opportunities, which should also be put into consideration when you're setting up your investment portfolio. And I think also very important is the derivative efforts of the Nigerian exchange. In June, 7 futures contracts were registered by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Derivative instruments are instruments that derive their value from an underlying instrument. And when I say an underlying instrument, I'm referring to stocks, bonds, interest rates, But the ones that that we are looking at that were recently registered have stocks as their underlying value. So I had mentioned before that Nigerian exchange is currently very cheap, very affordable compared to peers, and these are one of the efforts that the regulators are making to ensure that we deepen the Nigerian capital market, create more tradable assets, and also it provides an opportunity to hedge against volatility in the market. Okay, so before going to how we can create an investment portfolio, I think the most important question we need to ask ourselves is what type of investor are you? And what is paramount to you in terms of your need? And you need to actually scale them to arrange your investment need in terms of priorities, right? So are you more interested in capital acquisition? Do you want to buy low and sell high? Are you more interested in dividend income? You just want to get some form of returns on a yearly basis or on a semi-annual basis? Or you have a foreign obligation in future and you want to hedge against devaluation or hedge against inflation, or you also want to diversify your investments. Maybe you are heavily invested in real estate and you just want to look at the equity market, so allocate some funds in it. Or you're a strategic investor, you want to buy about 5% of the company. I think those questions are very important that we need to ask ourselves before you start creating an investment portfolio, because investment portfolio are in line with your specific needs. So you need to just identify those needs before moving on to creating the investment portfolio. So to create an investment portfolio, I think we've just put together 5 steps that would enable you to achieve that. And I think I would like to just mention that in order for you to understand the full gamut of creation of an investment portfolio, you need to engage a professional stockbroker or a portfolio manager that would walk you through the process. So number one, the first thing you look at is research. You have to do your research. You can never get it wrong by conducting your research. Research can be done on the top-bottom approach, or you can decide to use a bottom-up approach. So by bottom-up, you mean you start from the macro. We've already talked about GDP, expectations for GDP, expectations for inflation. The federal government recently announced the budget for 2022 about 16.3 trillion naira, right? What's the implication on certain sectors of the economy? How would that affect companies, right? So what that means is that there will be a lot of spending in the economy in 2022, and that would also lead to a lot of infrastructure building, and which also has implication on select sectors in the country. So I think fundamentals is conducting your fundamental analysis is very important. And moving on to security selection. So after conducting your research, you also need to diligently select your stock. So for instance, a sector might be very viable, but not all companies within that sector will be viable for you to invest your funds in. And based on your investment need, you also need to look at, okay, am I very interested in dividend income? Do I want stocks that want to pay dividend income? So you need to prioritize that. You need to select those stocks in line with your individual investment objective. And also to mention, even if you've identified a stocks to invest in, you also need to be sure of the timing of the price you're entering, right? You need to time your entry into the market. You need to ensure you're buying the stock at the right time. So all these factors are very important when you're setting up an investment portfolio. And like I mentioned before, corporate deals are very important. It might be very difficult for you to model corporate deals in your portfolio because it's very random, right? You really cannot tell when a corporate deal will be announced. But I think a very good way to do that is for you to check the website of the Nigerian exchange. There's a corporate disclosure page there that's pretty much highlights companies that have information about companies. And I think reading about those information would help you to maybe take positions on time, and at least you will be one of the investors in the equities market that will be able to take advantage of the opportunity after you've done your analysis on such an information. And I think number 4, we need to look at having fixed income investment in our portfolio, because fixed income investment helps to create a balance and to help you hedge against volatility. And also, there is a waiting time between when you conduct your research and when you eventually invest. You want to put your funds in a short-term money market instrument where at least you get some form of decent returns, depending when you've made up your mind on the investment or the asset class you want to invest in. And we have a number of federal government savings bonds that are issued monthly and also trading on the Nigerian exchange. And I think those savings bond actually provides decent returns for duration of 2 years, 3 years, right? You can invest in this savings bond. And if you decide to sell before the end of the tenure, the stocks, the bonds are also listed on the exchange and available for you to sell in line with prevailing market prices. And I think lastly, what you also need to consider in your portfolio is collective investment scheme. I'm sure a number of us are not really familiar about this, but collective investment scheme are a pool of funds that are set up by a professional portfolio manager in order to invest in a basket of securities or invest in a particular benchmark or track a particular benchmark. So we have a number of them. We have the exchange traded funds, we have mutual funds, we have real estate investment funds. So what this does is that it helps you to diversify your funds. So because the collective investment schemes are invested in a number of other securities, right, you will not be subject to the volatility of the market. And also because this instruments are being managed by a professional portfolio manager, it helps you, since you are not maybe too active in the market or you are not as active as you want to be, you can really delegate that responsibility to a professional manager that will help you monitor how your investment performs on the back of this asset class. Okay, so I think this slide just provides a snapshot of how a model portfolio or an investment portfolio should look like. So say, for instance, you're an aggressive investor, right? You want to allocate a higher proportion of your investment in equities or other variable income instruments, and you have 30% of it in fixed income instruments, whether bonds, treasury bills, or other fixed income instruments in order to create the right balance. And then also you want to allocate about 10% of your funds to other asset classes, maybe to other alternative asset classes. I've mentioned the ETFs, I mentioned mutual funds, and also maybe you want to hedge against some foreign obligation in future. You can also buy invest in some foreign currency investment. And that's to a large extent depends on a number of considerations. Like I mentioned, you need to look at your unique investment objective. Also very important is your risk appetite, because investors have lofty high returns in mind, but at the end of the day, they don't have the risk appetite to match up to those returns. So you need to ask those questions. And I think working with a professional manager would help you to achieve this. And also in line with your investment horizon, it also plays a part in the type of portfolio that you need to set up. And then you also have for a balanced investor, so pretty much just minimizing the risk in such a portfolio, maybe 50% of it allocated to equities and then 30% to fixed income, and then like that, you cascade it down. So I think this pretty much just sums up how you can create an investment portfolio. You just need to, and I think the time constraint might not help us to do justice to this. So if you can reach out to a professional stockbroker that would also help you achieve some of these objectives. Thank you.